Hello and welcome to TelecomTV. I'm Martin Warwick. We're here at the Small Cells World Summit in London's Docklands, and I'm talking with Steve Blythe, who is the Director of Spectrum Strategy at Orange. Steve, good to see you, and thanks for talking to us.
No problem.
One of the big controversies at the moment concerns what's being generically called LTE-U, or LAA in standard speak. That's sure. LTE across the public spectrum. How do you think that should be viewed?
Well, it's an interesting question. For us as a mobile operator, then our primary objective is around licensed spectrum. You know, we are an organisation that delivers a quality of service product, and that's how we differentiate ourselves. And we know that if customers are unhappy with the service they get, the network coverage, network performance, then they're going to leave. And it affects our bottom line, which obviously for us is a key concern. Licensed spectrum is our primary delivery mechanism because we believe it's the best way of delivering those quality of service objectives. However, we recognise that in certain circumstances we will need to use unlicensed spectrum for alternative services. So Wi-Fi is a good example, for instance. So when there's an opportune moment to offload a customer's traffic from an LTE network, for instance, using licensed spectrum, to a Wi-Fi network using unlicensed spectrum, then we'll take it. It's the most efficient way of delivering that service, that capacity to the customer. And the issues that you have in using unlicensed spectrum can be managed. If it's an indoor service, then you're less likely to see interference from other Wi-Fi networks that could degrade that service. So for us, there's a balance to be held between use of licensed spectrum and unlicensed. There are issues currently when using Wi-Fi, for instance, for traffic offload. In terms of managing that customer experience, for us, it's far more difficult to achieve. It's largely a separate network to our LTE networks on a different core network. So it makes managing that interface between LTE and Wi-Fi more difficult. So for us, LTE-U could be a way of bringing these two things together, of deriving some of the benefits that unlicensed spectrum can bring. The fact that it's pervasive, that there seems to be Wi-Fi access points everywhere, even within buildings to provide indoor coverage and capacity when required. LTE-U can exploit some of these benefits and not suffer from some of the problems that a standard Wi-Fi service can be impacted by. So, for instance, the interference, the fact that it's far more difficult to manage that customer experience, as I said, the fact that the way that you sign on to that network and all the protocols are different. So LTE-U could be one way of doing that. Now, we recognise that Wi-Fi as a technology would advance and deliver some of these requirements as well. So where it's actually going, we don't really know at this point, but as an adjunct to our existing LTE networks, the whole use of unlicensed spectrum seems to be, from us as a mobile operator, fairly beneficial.
The other side of the coin is, and of course Orange is a big telco by anybody's standards. Some people see this, critics see this as a big telco attempting to get a sort of hammerlock on unlicensed spectrum, while others say in the end it's a user-friendly method of aggregating data to provide a better service to users. Obviously you incline to the second one of those two points, but how would you rebut or come back against the people saying, this could be used to get a competitive lock on the network?
Well, I'll go back to my first response, my answer to your first question, really, in that we see LTE-U using unlicensed spectrum as a supplement to our existing networks. It's never going to replace them.
Sure.
It can't deliver the quality of service that we actually need. And the fact that it's shared spectrum that we can't completely control means there's no guarantees in terms of the amount of capacity you have at any particular point in time. So, unlicensed spectrum, LTE-U, can offer a supplement to our existing service. As I say, it's never going to replace it. We are primarily focused on the use of 3GPP services using a licensed spectrum approach. We're not in the game of blocking other users or trying to take complete control of this unlicensed spectrum, because that's not where we see our primary focus to be. So, I would rebut that fairly strongly. We see there are advantages, obviously, where we can improve the customer experience to deliver something that's compelling to those customers, and unlicensed spectrum can support us in that primary objective. But we see there are other users who want to use the spectrum, and it's not in our own interest to try and take control, to try and block these services from doing that.
Okay, let's move on. How important do you think 5G is going to be in this respect, and what impact is that going to have on spectrum allocation further down the line? Say, I'm asking you to look forward maybe 5 years, something like that?
Sure. Yeah, so there's a lot of debate going on at 5G at the moment, which surprised me. We're fairly early on in the standardisation around what 5G is, what type of services it will support, what it can actually deliver. And that debate has gathered momentum certainly this year in some of the seminars and workshops that I've been involved in. So 5G, I think, could deliver many different things, and there hasn't been too much momentum built in the industry about which particular direction it's going to go. Whether that be for the Internet of Things, whether that be for gigabit type services. There doesn't seem to be any particular consensus at this point in time. However, we know that it's coming, and you mentioned about the 2020 time frame. That's the sort of time frame that we think is right. Currently, as an international operator, we're investing heavily in our 4G networks. We see that as our primary focus at this point in time. But 5G is coming, and we need to make sure that we're focused on how that will evolve in the future now, to make sure it delivers what we want. When we're talking about the link, if any, between small cells and 5G, I think that is an interesting debate. Small cells, by their very nature, are covering small areas, and when you consider what that means in terms of spectrum, it means you've got far more opportunities. With macrocellular deployments, the primary focus is around low frequency spectrum, obviously, because you want to optimise your investment, your capex in your network base stations as much as you possibly can, and low frequency spectrum enables us to do that. With small cells, you don't have necessarily those sorts of constraints. It's not really a propagation type issue. So the ability to utilise higher frequency bands becomes more prevalent. And when you're focusing on high frequency bands, it gives you the opportunity to get access to more spectrum. As you go up and up the frequency band table, there's more spectrum becomes available. More spectrum means wider carriers, means the higher throughputs. And these are some of the areas that the industry is now focusing in on. We've got the World Radio Communications Conference coming up towards the end of this year.
Indeed.
There may be a debate at that on the future agenda for 2019, whether that will include specific bands for 5G, maybe more towards the high frequency end, possibly. But this is all going on over the next few months, and I think the debate will move on fairly quickly, and we as Orange are interested in driving that debate. So I think we just have to wait and see what happens.
Okay, well, we live in interesting times, as they say, and it's great to hear the viewpoint from someone who is a spectrum specialist and expert. So Steve Blythe, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.